Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host. Today, they're bringing you a really interesting guest. His name is Henry Gordon-Smith. He is the founder and CEO of Agritecture. Welcome to the podcast, Henry.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to be here.
I'm excited to dive in because you're working in a section of the food industry we don't always think about, more on the infrastructure side. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so Agritecture is a company that actually began as a blog in 2011. I was a college student curious about climate change and how I could respond to it. And I got sort of this interest in agriculture and this idea of urban agriculture and growing food in cities, but not the typical urban agriculture with community gardens. That was obviously interesting to me and had some already examples, but more about how we could use high technologies to grow more food in less spaces in cities. And so I came up with this term, Agritecture, launched a blog, started reporting on the technologies, the farms all around the world. And then in 2014, people started coming to me through my blog and asking for consulting services to plan and design these farms. Now, fast forward from them, we've been consulting for 10 years. We've done over 250 consultations in 45 plus countries, 80 plus cities around the world, different climates, different demographic conditions, different socioeconomic conditions. And it's been really, really exciting. So we don't only just plan the farms, going through feasibility studies, of a market study, concept development, site analysis, designing the farm, and selecting the technologies, the crops, and building economic models, which is all part of our feasibility studies. But we actually also provide other services now as the demand for our Agritecture's work has changed. For example, we advise governments on the policies to incentivize and encourage and plan urban agriculture. We also advise investors considering these high-tech vertical farms, which I'm sure we'll talk about, greenhouses or other types of climate-smart agriculture, and really a wider range of solutions. Now, a third part of the business, just to add this in there, we can talk about this a little bit too, is our software product. When COVID hit, we saw a decline in our services for obvious reasons. And we decided to build the world's first farm planning software, which we developed and is an online software where you can get the basic information to plan any greenhouse or vertical farm online at a dramatically lower cost and mostly faster than the alternatives out there.
Well, Henry, that's a lot, and I'm looking forward to unpacking some of those categories. And thanks for explaining, but back in 2011, when you started blogging, and then even in 2014, when people started coming to you, could you have ever envisioned where you'd be today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to so many people, my parents, my first investors, my team members that we've had since the beginning, and some that have moved on to other roles, the first clients that took a chance on a young guy that was passionate about this subject. I have so much gratitude to my mentors because I have to pinch myself that I get to have this dream job where I get to travel the world, learn about agriculture, share what I'm learning, and help really adapt to climate change, which is my main passion and my main reason for doing this is I want to adapt to climate change. So yeah, it's been an incredible experience. I have to pinch myself. It sort of feels like a dream.
Yeah, you were on the very front end, and I guess as an encouragement to maybe some other entrepreneurs out there who have an idea or a thought or a passion, something that they want to investigate. Let this be encouragement to you to follow that, because you never know where that's going to lead, and that's exciting. Well, let's jump into that climate change topic that you were talking about. So that was really the impetus for you to think about other options, other solutions, and how we can do agriculture better.
Exactly. I was studying political science, and I was going to be a diplomat because I had grown up around the world. I have an international background, but I found that my internship in the public sector was kind of boring. It was too bureaucratic, it was too slow. And I wanted to move into something more business and entrepreneurship related. And some mentors of mine, some successful business people that my parents knew said, business is about finding a gap and filling it better than anyone else. So I started opening my mind to look for this gap. And I had this visiting professor, Dr. Raul Pacheco Vega, from Mexico, who came to the University of British Columbia, and he was an expert in environmental security. Now, what does that mean? That means basically policy and conflict related to resources. So water wars is a term about how countries fight over water resources. And actually, it blew my mind because the US and Mexico have been fighting over water for over 70 years. even the US and Canada, Pakistan and India, and it goes on and on and on. And as we looked at the data around climate change, even back then, it was so clear to me suddenly, this aha moment that this is going to be so much more difficult in the future. It's going to be so much of a bigger issue. And I wanted to engage in that. I wanted to respond to that. So that was the impetus for moving into climate change and sort of combining that with entrepreneurship. And the way I found the gap was I actually started 3 blogs. Agritecture was one of them. And I tested all 3 blogs for 6 months until I found which one inspired me and inspired others more.
Okay. Well, what were the other two? Were they like
Oh, well,
failures, or did they kind of collapse into agritecture?
no, I mean they worked. People liked them. They
Yeah.
just didn't go viral like the other,
Okay.
like agriculture did, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
one was called water technology, and it
Okay.
was not just a different topic. My main interest was water at the beginning. My first published paper, my only published academic paper is on water wars. And so that was my main interest at the beginning. I wasn't really super into food. It was more complicated, and I was interested in water. So this was a blog that was just about the latest news in water and technology. And it was a
Okay.
more like a news style site. Then another one was a little bit more futuristic and utopian. It was called Urban Layering. And it was about, instead of thinking about towers in our cities that are vertical, let's think about creating layers in the city that almost makes the whole city
Oh,
taller over time.
yeah.
And sort of layers, like imagine if Fifth Avenue, you add another layer above it, and the top floor was just pedestrian and bike, and the bottom floor was almost like a tunnel for cars. So the cars and the pedestrians didn't interact with each other. And
Yeah.
this was, I guess, pre-Highline, or at least near Highline. So these ideas were out there. There was a lot of architectural designs related to this, and this was more of like a photo blog about this. So you can see how they all sort of connect,
They
because
do.
agritecture was a good balance of the visuals that inspire really cool concepts and towers, but also really practical information about the business and technology. So I think it was just sort of like a Goldilocks, sort of, too big, too small, just right situation.
Exactly. And that's the one that hit. But within what you do with agritecture, better water usage and more efficient water usage, I know, is a large part of that. So it all folds together.
Yeah, and even planning cities. I mean, recently I sort of said our work has evolved, but I just got off a call with a client and we're designing an entire new city. And so we are planning the food systems for the architects as part of that city, which is
Yeah.
unbelievable as far as just an opportunity and a challenge and a way to bring all of our experience in architecture together. So we're thinking about the food as infrastructure, distribution, education, training, not just the farms, but the whole thing. What happens when we design cities with food and agriculture, food security, and adaptable agriculture within it from the beginning, And so, yeah, you can see how it all sort of connects. When I was younger, I always wanted, I didn't think I wanted to be an architect, but I was always drawing things. I was always designing layouts for buildings. I was always designing new cities. So, this is a really exciting way that but I'm not the best at math, to be honest. So for me, I couldn't be an architect, and a lot of architects I spoke to said, it doesn't pay that well. It's not that great. It's crazy hours. So, I get to sort of be a fake architect.
Fake
And
architect.
I get to work with these amazing architects and provide what knowledge I can related to that.
Well, I think you're the most successful fake architect I've ever met, Henry. That's
I'm
really
the
great.
Agritech. That's my name on
That's the
Instagram.
agritech. That's right. We're not going to use that as like a title for this show at all. We are going to steer clear from that. But I wanted to say that what you're doing now is really a far cry from your political science degree.
Yes.
Certainly, the pace of it is a lot
So
different, and you never anticipated, like maybe sometimes you wish for that little bit more measured pace. However, being able to do things like design this city from the start, you really are involved in the policy making because you're setting up to be able to provide for the things you were talking about. And food security is one of the ones that is top of mind today because there are a lot of areas of the world that do not have food security. And how can you impact that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, right? Like you can design all you want, but without the policies in place or many other things like the people or the financing or the just overall political will to make it to do these things, it doesn't happen. And so I've had a lot of different clients through the years and experiences that have taught me about this. And a political science background really did help me a lot. So more recently, just to give you some examples, we completed the comprehensive plan for urban agriculture for the city of Dallas. So this is again looking at things like social equity and its relationship to food, training centers, how do we use vacant spaces, what is the zoning policy we need, things like this, and a lot of stakeholder engagement that my colleagues, Jeffrey Landau, Brakely Bryant, Christian Canlin, did such an amazing job on that. And that's a public document that now any city can look at and benefit from related to their cities. We also worked with the city of Atlanta. We've worked with the city of Auckland, various other cities in the world. One that was particularly interesting to me in the early years of my career is I was a judge and an advisor for a program called Paris Culture, which was an urban agriculture competition in Paris. And this is one of the most successful policies, I think, or policy mechanisms in urban agriculture. They basically got real estate owners, landowners, to give up land, spaces like rooftops or vacant spaces into a competition that businesses could submit to develop those into urban farms with some preferential lease rates. And they really just converted so much space in Paris, a very difficult city from a zoning perspective, from a historical perspective, from a culture perspective. And now it's one of the top urban agriculture cities in the world. So that's exciting. Policy-wise, when I was younger, I did an internship with the International Organization for Migration, the UN's migration organization. And I just maybe 2 months ago got back from Tunisia for my second project with Tanya Djedovic, who sort of leads some of the North Africa work for them. And what we're doing there is we're trying to connect migration and green transition, right? So as countries want to be more green, we have to really think about the skills needed for them. And agriculture is one of those areas. What skills do they need? Are they migrants that can have those skills? Can we upskill migrants? Can we create programs where countries like Egypt or Tunisia, where we've worked with the IOM, where people are trying to move out of them to other countries? Can we create programs? They call them skilled mobility partnerships. For example, Tunisia could partner with France, and Tunisians could go to France, learn some skills, work in some farms, bring those skills back as part of a circular migration scheme, and then strengthen the green transition in Tunisia. So this is the kind of work we've just completed that's, very international government organization related work.
Right. And very much out of what we think about normally with infrastructure and when you think of agritecture and the
planning farms, it's
total architecture part of that. Yeah, it's more than that. That is very interesting programs that you're able to be involved in and do some of the policy work. Well, back to water, because I know we talked before about hydroponics, and that's really a thriving industry and growing at this point. You know a lot more than I do, but I think it's a great solution that's out there, and you're really involved with that.
Yeah, let's just give a little bit of a background on what that is and why it's important.
Please.
So we use about 70% of our very limited fresh water for agriculture. And if you think about farms outdoors, most of them depend upon rainwater, which is renewable, but a lot of them, as those rain patterns shift, they get more and more into groundwater to produce their crops. The farmers have to produce their crops to maintain their livelihood. So they're going to get that water somewhere. There's other places where there's very little water, where they use desalinated water and very intensive systems to do that. So water is the most important variable for farmers, bottom line, and pretty much. Without that, you don't have any chance. So, as that gets more scarce, we have to think of new ways to do this. Now, there's other parts of the world, island states that just don't have any water resources, desert areas, various even experiments about thinking about how do we grow food in space, where having soil itself didn't make sense. Right? So because soil is heavy and there is no soil around, or there's less water. So hydroponics literally means water, and ponics, hydro, work. So basically it means that the water is doing the work versus the soil. So soil typically has macro and micronutrients in it that range. That's what the roots and the microbes in the roots absorb as water is delivered to it. But if you remove the soil, you can deliver nutrients directly to the roots without that. So hydroponics involves basically creating a structure for the roots to hold them in place that's inert. It doesn't have any good or bad nutrients in it. And then a system that's engineered to deliver water to those roots at the right times so that the plant grows faster and healthier and gets exactly what it needs. But the primary benefit, on top of all those other ones, is that hydroponics can be recirculating because I've engineered that irrigation system. There's a wide range of hydroponic methods, NFT, deep water culture. You can look up aeroponics, aquaponics, and they can recirculate water in different ways. So you save fertilizer and you save water. We're talking about a range of 60 to 95% less water than field production with these methods, based on academic data. It varies where you are, it varies on the method. But really, it's a dramatic saving because you're literally engineering a system that can recirculate it. And it allows you to also grow in places where it doesn't matter if there's good soil or not.
Yeah, amazing. And in addition to that, I understand the cultivation of those products. I mean, the harvesting of them can be all the time. We're not limited by the seasonality of whatever the location is because they're indoors. And so
So
it's a
that's
controlled environment.
Yeah, controlled environment agriculture. So let's again get into another definition. So hydroponics can be outdoors.
Okay.
In World War II, there was some the U.S. Army when they would go to the Southeast Asia when they were fighting in Japan and the Philippines, et cetera. They brought hydroponic systems with them that they would put onto the beaches or whatever to produce some products. But these
Okay.
were outdoor systems. If the weather's good, decent, you don't necessarily need to control that so much. Even in India, South America, we see simplified hydroponic systems that are just outdoor or even on facades of buildings or anywhere. So it can be outdoors, but if it's outdoors and it's too hot or it's too sunny or there's pests, you create all these problems. So controlled environment agriculture is about putting it in a greenhouse or in a warehouse structure where you replace sunlight with artificial lighting. There's ranges of technology to be controlled environment. You could start with something that's just a simple shade structure all the way up to a high-tech vertical farm where you actually replace the sunlight. And there's benefits and trade-offs across that spectrum. And that's what we call controlled environment agriculture. So we're not actually controlling the water we deliver to the plants. We're actually controlling the temperature, the ventilation, the light. We're controlling as much as possible, especially as we get to that more high-tech side, to maximize production. Another benefit beyond the resilience to whatever's happening outside, right? It doesn't matter the weather in the same way, is you can eliminate pesticide use. So because you can protect it from the pests, you can eliminate pesticide use. And I think many people don't realize just how much pesticide use and just how out of control it is for agriculture outdoors.
Yeah, I think that's you're right, an unthought of benefit. And thanks for giving us the full array of options with the hydroponics and aeroponics, et cetera, because I always think of them, I guess maybe more current day with my mind as being in, a building, maybe that warehouse opportunity, because that's what I've been exposed to, not realizing that it doesn't matter. I mean, they can be outdoors, especially in a milder climate that might not have as much variation. It's
Yeah.
easier, but you still do have, it's
I
not
want people
totally
to know
controlled.
that. I
Yeah,
want people to know that because there's a lot of hype and excitement about vertical farming. Again, these warehouses you're talking about.
yeah,
And it's called vertical farming because when you go indoors and you replace the sun with light, you can actually stack them because you don't have you're not waiting for light to come in. So you can
right.
actually put multiple layers of production in. That's why it's called a vertical farm. So there's a lot of attention on that. There has been in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Part of why our blog got so popular. But there's also been a lot of failures because it's been hyped up. There's limitations to that. It's very expensive. The more
Yeah,
equipment you have, the more cost, and you need that to be passed on to the consumer, and that doesn't always make sense everywhere. So at agriculture, we really promote, design thinking. What is the context? What is
right.
the temperature? What are people willing to pay? How much space do you have? How much water do you have? And then let's design the system with all this array of amazing technologies and methods that is going to be the best opportunity for the farmer to be successful, for the environment to be managed responsibly, and for the consumer to have fresher, high quality product. So
That's a great point.
you need to keep an open mind and not just go straight towards technology because it's sexy and cool and looks awesome. You really need to think about the range and be an architect, design.
Yes, I see what you're saying. I think technology is sexy though, but that's just my personal opinion. So I'm
Yeah.
staying with it. But I love that you really do have to keep the environment in mind. You travel the world, and I know that because I've talked to you twice now, and you've been in different countries both times. And so
Yeah, every
it's very
time, literally.
exciting.
Yeah, my
You're not,
schedule is pretty wild. I'm a
yeah.
nomad, so I don't have an apartment or a home. I just travel all the
Yeah,
time.
you're not making it up, and you do go to the
Super rare.
environment and evaluate what that is and figure out what's best for that. But that's a really good point. We do tend to go to, wow, this technology is available, or we can simulate sunlight. So let's do that. But that's not always the best answer because there are other considerations. Like you said, energy is expensive and the equipment is expensive. So depending on where you are and what you're growing, how you can fix the margins on that product that make it still affordable for the people. So that whole education piece though, I mean, back to, I think you talked about software in the very beginning, which is another area that you've delved into to try to give
Yeah.
the municipalities or the more local areas the tools that they need to kind of do some of this design. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, our software, which is called Agritecture Designer, we started developing it in 2020, and it was really about letting those that were seeking consistently the same questions to be answered, get those answers in a methodology based on agriculture's experience that helps them plan farms responsibly so they can be more successful. So the data itself is really hard to access. For example, vertical farming data is not easy to get. It was so much harder then than it is now. And we've released a lot of it through our work.
Okay.
So, you can't get the yields for a vertical farm. And if you change the size of that vertical farm, you can't get that very easily. And if you change the crop for it. So how do you design? How do you go through this process I just mentioned if there's nowhere to get that information? I mean, you can hire a consultant, but consultants are not for everyone. Some farms are small. Some people are just exploring their ideas to say if they want to raise some money from angel investors. So Agritecture Designer is for exactly that. You can start very small with online classes, 2.5 hours of classes, which will save you thousands of dollars and tons of time. Our classes were voted the best urban farming classes by Tree Hugger, most affordable, $29 for a month. And basically, you can learn everything you need to know about which crops, what's the difference between vertical farms and greenhouses and outdoor production, what are the business models, climate control, should you do organic? All of it's on there with agritecture staff telling you from their experience in nice filmed classes with a little bit of activities you can demonstrate your knowledge. And these are actually based on classes we used to do in person in our office in New York, but then we shut it down because of COVID.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of it. Now, after that, if you do still want to move forward to plan your farm, you can upgrade or immediately you can get our more premium service, which is $149 a month. And that one allows you to actually model out your farm. So you can literally say, my farm is in, where are you now?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, great. Love it.
Yep.
We call it Aglanta. We worked with Atlanta as well. With the
Atlanta. I know I heard you mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could put the location to the area code in Atlanta, and it will pull in the climate data and the market data for what people typically pay for those products in that market.
Okay.
Then you can choose your size of farm. You can choose from over 115 crops that are common for greenhouses, vertical farms, or container farms, and many different methods of hydroponics that we've mentioned.
Oh.
We literally calculated all of it, built algorithms, and made it. So if you fill in the form to build a model, it might take you 10 minutes max. And within that time, you're going to get a snapshot of the economics for your farm. And then you can refine it live. I'll send you some videos so you can show them on the podcast. You
Okay.
can refine it live so that you can see what's happening and where you can make your fit. Literally going through the process that agriculture goes through, but just based on standard data versus our consulting services, which go really into customized solutions, really much more in depth. So it's a really incredible product that I'm so proud of because it democratizes the knowledge for anyone anywhere to plan a successful greenhouse or vertical farm.
Yeah, so you just centralized like your frequently asked questions or your most common, what parameters do you need to know to even begin to get an idea of the feasibility of this particular proposal, whatever
Yeah.
it is they're
And you
looking
can
to do.
model, like you can manipulate it, right? Like you can
Yeah,
model it and change it. Like let's say even if you got a quote from a lighting company, you can put in that pricing for that light and
yeah,
change it based on.
yeah.
So we give a lot
Cool.
of advanced control. And there's one last part to the software, which is interesting, which is we have a marketplace of suppliers that we have vetted. So once you're done with the plan for the farm, you can actually look through vetted suppliers that agritecture recommends, request quotes from them. We have about 35 different partners. Even some of them can provide financing or
Yeah,
services to help you manage the facility, depending on where you are. So we've got greenhouse providers, vertical farming providers, nutrient delivery systems, lighting systems. It's all on there. So it's sort of like this community as well, where once you're done with your plan, you can connect with the suppliers to make it happen.
yeah.
And it's a big passion of mine because you know whatever, we've worked with 250, 270 clients in our history, and I'm really proud of that. But I want to help thousands, tens of
Yeah.
thousands of new farms to make the impact, and software could do that.
And that's what I was about to say. You're able to scale it up not by growing the individuals and making everybody come to you for consulting, but by essentially opening the kimono and say, here's the information you need.
Yeah.
Here we can manipulate it for you. Here are some vetted partners that kind of know how we work and can help you, etc. So great service and also education for people who are out there looking for information in this area. So that's really excellent. Well, what else is going on in your world? You have, I know you have speaking engagements all over, and you're always gathering data for them. I think you referred to some kind of census you're doing right now with different types of farms in preparation for a talk next.
Yeah. So, like, part of our DNA and part of my mission to help my personal mission, which is to respond to climate change and help us adapt to the inevitable future where there's less water and more storms and more shocks to our system. That's the inevitable future that I see. So my mission as a social entrepreneur is to democratize that. I want to make money while doing it, but it's not my main priority is just to make money. I want to make the impact. So you can see how the software relates to that because it creates this access for this future. I mean, this is the biggest database of these kinds of farms and this data in the world. I mean, you can't get the yield data anywhere. So we do a lot of things related to that, even from the blog that we continue today and provide free, consistent knowledge all the time,
Yeah.
weekly basis. We're providing new content, top 10 mistakes vertical farms make, various things about regional analysis, et cetera. We have guest bloggers that focus on really sophisticated policy and science topics. It's a really incredible thing that we're doing since 2011. It's just crazy to think about. But one of the things we did, I think the first year was in 2019. We partnered with a group called AutoGrow, and we called it the census because we wanted every single basically vertical farm and sort of these urban greenhouses to respond. And we wanted to know what size they were, what they're growing, what their challenges are, et cetera. So long story short, we send this out to a bunch of farms all around the world. They submit information. This year's theme is about technology adoption. What are they interested in? IoT, AI, cloud computing, automation. How do they think about that from their first farm to their second farm? What are the things they wish from suppliers? And also some of the profile of their farm. And it's a community-driven engagement where they submit information. We give them things like free access to our software and other incentives. And we then analyze that data and share it. So I'll be sharing it in a keynote talk in Raleigh, North Carolina at CE Ag World. And then we'll be publishing it in an attractive document. And you can see previous years if you Google search CEA census or agritecture CEA census. You can see the previous year's reports, and these are so valuable. We've gotten so much feedback. These are featured in the news or featured in press. They're featured, companies look at them to understand what's the energy use relative to us. It's the only sort of benchmark solution, the earliest one at least. And it brings the community together to say, hey, we're in this together. We're trying to push the boundaries with new technologies to grow food in a much more difficult world. So we invite all farmers, even farmers considering CEA, to fill in the census this year. So we've got, I think, 45 countries so far, maybe 40 countries so far that responded. It's supposed to end on July 19th, I think, but I think we're going to extend it a bit longer.
Yeah.
And we've sort of got, I think, 250 responses so far. So we got a long ways to go. We want to hit 500 this year. Last year, I think, was 400. And then again, we're going to publish that and share that information.
Okay, that sounds great. By the time this show airs, I'm afraid the deadline will be over, but certainly they can
That's
look to
okay. Then you
next
can look
year
for the report.
and
Yeah.
look to get the report for this year. But not to give you another piece of business or focus, but seems to me like a mastermind of these farmers is also another opportunity to bring best practices together and let them share their success stories, their failures, and I know that this report probably does some of that too with the questions that you're asking and how you're bringing the information forward. So that's excellent.
Mastermind is a good idea. I mean, we've done that for a little bit for some client work where we're working with Cornell for a National Science Foundation grant on like what these growers need from a skills perspective. So we brought 35 growers to New York and went through that and sort of got them to share their experience and what they wish they had known or what they think these growers need to know. And we have a couple of other communities. I've got WhatsApp communities for most of the regions in the world with CEOs of these companies that we share a sort of CEO level collaboration and knowledge. So yeah, I'm all about breaking down those boundaries. I think those barriers rather, people I think know that about me, and I love to share. And again, I think we're on a greater mission together. We have so many challenges ahead of us, and we're just trying to build the foundation to even have a chance to adapt to them.
Absolutely. I think that your mindset is clear from how you've shared today and how open you are with the information and how you are trying to not just keep it all closed within agritecture. You want people to benefit from what you've learned along the way so you can impact a lot more people. Well,
Yeah.
Henry, what else would you like to share with our audience before we go today? Because we have certainly covered a lot of topics, and I know you could probably talk for a lot longer, but
Yeah, it's
what
such a
else would you
pleasure to
like
be
to leave
here.
them with?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I mean, I love to inspire and guide people and have them learn for myself. I guess one thing I like to always say is for the consumers out there, which includes all of us, remember that when you go to the store or you go to a restaurant and you spend money, you're voting. That is like your vote every single day that you're voting. What food choices you make and you buy, that's what you're going to get more of. That drives the market. And together we can actually to say we prefer quality, we prefer transparency. We want to know who our farmer is. We want to know what pesticides are on it. And we want to, frankly, not have pesticides on it and want them to be grown in responsible ways and want them to be grown closer to us so we know that's more resilient and it's benefiting the local economy. So vote with your dollars or whatever currency you use. Just try to take another moment when you think about it with food because the impact of the food system is so enormous. If you're an entrepreneur, I would say again, take risks, experiment, and believe in yourself. And if something doesn't go the way you want, pivot to your next risk you want to take. And eventually you'll find your flow. And, again, I'm so grateful for what I've been able to do, but there's a lot of things I tried leading up to this. And I think that culture I created or that psychology of diving deep into something and taking a risk and really believing it, but then having the courage to leave it when it doesn't work. That is really the way I think to build this entrepreneurship.
Excellent, Henry. Thanks for those words of wisdom and thanks for being with us. To our audience, if you would like to hear more interviews like Henry's, please let us know. Comment on this. We answer everyone. Please subscribe to us so you don't miss a show. Until next week, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.